There is a very specific, polished way that wealthy, appearance-obsessed women inflict pain. They don't scream, they don't throw things, they don't call you names to your face or banish you from the house in a fit of melodramatic rage. Instead, they use a scalpel disguised as a butter knife. They smile, they touch your arm gently, and they make what my mother-in-law Patricia liked to call small adjustments. My name is Rachel Donovan. I'm 37 years old. I am a size 22. I have been a size 22 since the day I met my husband Gregory, 9 years ago. I am comfortable in my skin. I am healthy. I am successful in my career as a financial analyst. And my husband looks at me like I hung the moon and the stars in the sky. But to Patricia Donovan, I have never been a beloved daughter-in-law. I have been an aesthetic inconvenience, a blemish on the perfectly curated country club-approved canvas of the Donovan family. For 9 years, I endured the tyranny of her small adjustments. It started subtly at first. The year Gregory and I got engaged, there was an engagement dinner hosted at Patricia and Harold's sprawling estate. When it came time to take family photographs, Patricia gently grasped my elbows and steered me toward the back edge of the group, half hidden behind Gregory's tall, athletic cousin. "Just a small adjustment, darling," she cooed softly, her diamonds glinting in the evening light. "The height dynamic works so much better if you stand right behind Thomas. It creates a lovelier slope for the photographer." I didn't think much of it then. I smiled, I posed, and when the photos arrived 3 weeks later, I was nothing more than a floating head in the back corner. But then came the wedding. Patricia had insisted on hiring her preferred photographer, a man who shot exclusively for high society bridal magazines. When the proofs came back, I noticed something strange about the family portraits. Every single full-body shot of me standing next to Patricia and Harold had been discarded. The only photos that made the final album were either close-up facial shots or wide shots where I was deliberately positioned behind large, elaborate floral arrangements or seated while the rest of the thin, impeccably tailored Donovan women stood around me, effectively masking my body. "It's just about visual balance, Rachel," Patricia said when I gently brought it up, sipping her Earl Grey tea from a bone china cup. "You understand? We wanted the eye to be drawn to the beautiful architecture of the venue, a small adjustment to the composition. For 9 years, this was my reality. If there was a family beach trip, Patricia would miraculously forget to pack my designated towel for the group boat excursion, meaning I'd have to stay back at the house while they took their gleaming, sun-kissed family yacht photos. If there was a holiday party, I was inevitably assigned the task of overseeing the caterers in the kitchen right exactly at the moment the formal family portrait was being arranged in the grand foyer. "Rachel is so good at managing the staff," Patricia would announce to the room. "She's practically saving the evening. Let's just take a quick shot while she handles that minor crisis." And Gregory loved me fiercely, but he was a man who had been raised in an environment where avoiding conflict with Patricia was treated as a fundamental law of physics. He didn't see the scalpel cuts because Patricia was so incredibly skilled at making them look like accidents. When I pointed them out, he would frown, look troubled, and say, "She just gets so frantic about these events, Rachel. I don't think she means it that way. You know how she is about her aesthetics." I let it go, I swallowed it, I smiled, and I loved my husband, and I accepted that in Patricia's world, my body was a shameful secret that needed to be managed, hidden, and cropping out of existence. I endured the quiet, elegant erasure because I chose peace, but peace is a fragile thing. And everyone, even a calm, patient, size 22 woman who is used to being shoved into the background, has a breaking point. Mine came wrapped in the guise of a $34,000 gift. Despite Patricia's endless campaign to minimize my existence, I actually harbored a deep fondness for my father-in-law, Harold. Harold was a quiet, gentle man who had made his fortune in commercial real estate, but had never lost the humble, slightly bewildered demeanor of a man who couldn't quite believe his own luck. He loved Gregory. He adored me. He never cared what size I wore. He only cared that I made his son incredibly happy. During the family's grand Christmas dinner in 2022, after Patricia had successfully maneuvered me into taking the photograph rather than being in it, Harold and I found ourselves sitting by the roaring fireplace in the library, drinking heavily spiced eggnog. "You know, Rachel," Harold had murmured, staring into the flames with a wistful look in his pale blue eyes, "I'm turning 70 next year, and Patricia and I have our 40th wedding anniversary coming up." "I know, Harold," I smiled softly, resting a hand on his arm. "It's going to be a massive milestone year for you both. We've traveled all over the world," he continued, a soft sigh escaping his lips. "Paris, Milan, Tokyo, everywhere Patricia wanted to go. But do you know the one place I really, truly loved? The only place I ever felt totally at peace? Where was that? I asked. Palmetto Bluff, he said, his voice dropping to a nostalgic whisper. We went there 25 years ago. Down in South Carolina. Just quiet water, Spanish moss, old trees, no society galas, no pressure. Just peace. I've always wanted to go back to the Magnolia Cottage there, before I get too old to travel. But Patricia... Well, she likes the Riviera? He chuckled sadly and took another sip of eggnog. He had forgotten the conversation by the next morning. But I didn't forget. I have an excellent memory, and I believe in honoring the people who treat me with kindness. That very night, I opened a secret savings account. For the next 4 months, I aggressively funneled portions of my yearly bonus, my stock dividends, and my personal savings into that account. My plan was grand, and I intended to execute it perfectly. For Harold's 70th birthday and their 40th anniversary, I was going to gift them a 4-night, all-expenses-paid family retreat to the Magnolia Cottage at the Palmetto Bluff Resort. It was notoriously difficult to book, incredibly exclusive, and staggeringly expensive. It took me weeks of negotiating with the resort's concierge, but I finally secured the dates. The total cost, covering the cottage, the private dining, the spa packages for Patricia, and the bespoke fishing excursions for Harold, came to exactly $34,000. I paid the $6,800 non-refundable deposit up front. The rest was scheduled to be charged directly to my card. I had the booking confirmation printed on heavy cream-colored cardstock, sealed in a luxurious silver envelope, ready to be presented at Harold's 70th birthday gala. I had kept it a complete secret from everyone, even Gregory. I wanted it to be the ultimate surprise. I wanted to show Patricia that despite her endless subtle cruelties, I was a gracious, generous woman who belonged in this family. I foolishly believed that a gift of this magnitude, an act of pure, selfless kindness aimed directly at her husband's deepest wish, might finally earn me a permanent, uncropped place at her table. I was wrong. The weekend of Harold's 70th birthday gala arrived, and Patricia, as always, was ready to make a small adjustment. The gala was held at the country club, naturally. The ballroom had been transformed into a winter garden of white hydrangeas and dripping crystal. I arrived wearing a stunning, custom-tailored emerald green evening gown that draped perfectly over my curves. I felt beautiful, I felt confident, and nestled safely in my sparkling clutch was the silver envelope containing the Palmetto Bluff reservation. Patricia, clad in a stiff, impeccably fitted cream lace gown, was in her element. She was moving between the arriving guests, directing the waitstaff with tiny flicks of her wrist, wearing the event the way a master conductor wears a symphony performance. When Gregory and I walked in, she greeted us at the door with her usual practiced icy warmth. "Gregory, darling, you look handsome as always," she beamed, kissing his cheek. Then she turned her expertly contoured face to me. A brief, sweeping glance up and down my size 22 frame. A tight, perfectly polite smile. "Rachel, you look lovely. That color is very brave." "Thank you, Patricia," I replied, ignoring the veiled insult. "The room looks absolutely spectacular." "Only the best for Harold," she sighed dramatically. "Now go mingle, darlings. Dinner will be served shortly." For the first hour, everything was perfectly fine. I chatted with cousins, I sipped a glass of sparkling water, and I watched Harold laugh with his old college friends. I felt a warm glow of anticipation in my chest, imagining his face when he opened the silver envelope later that evening. 20 minutes before the guests were scheduled to move toward the grand dining area, Patricia suddenly appeared at my elbow. She smelled of expensive jasmine perfume and anxiety. She reached out and placed a cool, perfectly manicured hand lightly on my forearm. "Rachel, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A very small adjustment." I heard the phrase and felt something go completely violently still inside me. The warm glow in my chest vanished, replaced by a sudden, heavy dread. Small adjustment was always how Patricia prefaced the restructuring of something I had been planning to do normally. "What is it, Patricia?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level. She offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. There was a slight miscalculation with the catering staff regarding the seating arrangements. The main table where Harold and I and the immediate family are sitting is just visually quite crowded, and the event photographer is going to be taking the large family portrait right at the table during the third course. She paused, letting the implication hang heavily in the air between us. "So?" I prompted softly. "So," she continued smoothly, her grip tightening fractionally on my arm. "The children's overflow table is right near the kitchen door. It's so much roomier back there. You'll be so incredibly comfortable." And the main table just photographs so much better with its current balance. I knew you'd understand. You're always such a team player, Rachel. I turned my head slowly and looked at the main table positioned in the center of the room beneath the largest crystal chandelier. There were 12 chairs set around it. 12 chairs for 12 adults, every single one of Gregory's siblings, their spouses, and his parents. All of them thin. All of them perfectly conforming to Patricia's aesthetic standards. Then I looked across the vast ballroom to the overflow table. It was shoved into the far corner, practically touching the swinging double doors of the kitchen. Seated at it were 7 children, ranging in age from 4 to 12, a chaotic mess of spilled juice cups and discarded dinner rolls. There were 2 empty chairs at that table. I looked at Gregory. He was standing about 4 feet away from me, deeply engrossed in a conversation about golf with his uncle. He had not heard a single word of this exchange. He had his back turned. Patricia was staring at me, her eyes hard and glittering beneath her perfectly applied makeup. She wasn't asking me. She was telling me that my body was too large, too unacceptable to ruin the balance of her perfect family photograph. She was banishing me to sit with the toddlers, out of sight, out of frame, out of mind. I stood there for 3 seconds. 3 seconds where I could have screamed, where I could have caused a massive scene, where I could have dragged Gregory over and demanded he defend me. But I didn't. I looked at Patricia. I looked at the dark, ugly truth behind her perfectly polite smile. "Of course, Patricia," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I understand perfectly." Her shoulders dropped in relief. "You're a dear, Rachel." "Truly." She fluttered away to direct a waiter. I did not go to Gregory. I did not make a fuss. I simply turned and walked across the ballroom, my emerald dress trailing behind me. And I took my seat at the children's overflow table, right next to the swinging kitchen doors. I sat down. A 7-year-old boy named Jonah, who had a smudge of butter on his cheek, immediately looked at me and demanded, "Do you have any gum?" "I do not have any gum, Jonah," I told him calmly. He sighed heavily, rolled his eyes, and turned back to aggressively tapping on his iPad. For the next 2 hours, from my exiled corner by the kitchen, I had a perfectly clear, unobstructed sightline to the main table. I watched the first course arrive. I watched the second course, and then I watched the photographer step forward. I watched Patricia stand up, clapping her hands gracefully, directing the family. I watched them arrange themselves around the head table. 12 adults. Gregory was positioned in the dead center, right next to his parents. His 2 sisters were placed symmetrically on either side. It was a masterpiece of social engineering. There was no gap where I should have been standing. There was no awkward, empty space. The composition was perfectly balanced, visually coherent, and entirely deliberately without me. As the photographer raised his massive camera, I saw Gregory suddenly look up. I saw him scan the room. He was looking for me. His eyes swept over the crowded tables, past the floral arrangements, until finally they landed on the dark corner by the kitchen. They landed on me sitting in my beautiful emerald gown, quietly drinking ice water next to a 7-year-old playing Minecraft. From 50 feet away, I watched his expression change. I watched it shift from confusion to shock, and then to a devastating, horrified realization. I watched his face do something I had never seen it do before. A profound, gut-wrenching recognition of his mother's cruelty that had arrived about 7 years too late. The flash of the camera went off. The perfect, balanced, thin family was forever documented. I reached into my clutch. My fingers brushed against the heavy silver envelope holding the $34,000 reservation. I quietly took it out, slipped it into my purse, and zipped it shut. After the dinner concluded, during the quiet, suffocating car ride home, Gregory said absolutely nothing for 4 long, agonizing minutes. He just gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white in the darkness of the car. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse. "I saw where she put you. I kept my eyes trained on the passing streetlights outside the window. I know. I should have." He choked on the words, swallowing hard. "I didn't notice until the photo was being arranged. I should have noticed sooner. I should have come and gotten you. I'm so sorry, Rachel." I turned my head and looked at him, my beautiful, conflict-avoidant husband. "Yes," I said quietly, without malice, but with absolute finality. "You should have." The silence stretched out again, thick and heavy with consequence. "What are you going to do?" he asked softly, terrified of the answer. I already know exactly what I'm going to do, I replied, my voice steady, cold, and calm. But I'm going to sleep on it for 3 days, just to make absolutely sure I'm certain. I slept on it for 3 days. By Tuesday morning, I was dead certain. On Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. sharp, I sat at the pristine quartz island in my kitchen, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and picked up my phone. I dialed the luxury concierge line for the Palmetto Bluff Resort. The reservation manager, a man with a smooth, professional voice named Christopher, answered on the second ring. "Good morning. This is Christopher at Palmetto Bluff Reservations. How may I assist you today?" "Good morning, Christopher," I said, my tone crisp and businesslike. "My name is Rachel Donovan. I have a reservation under the name Patricia Donovan for the Magnolia Cottage, 4 nights, beginning this coming Friday." "Ah, yes, Mrs. Donovan," Christopher replied cheerfully, clicking softly in the background. "I have that pulled up right here. The 40th anniversary retreat. What can I help you with? Do we need to arrange additional spa services?" "No, Christopher," I said calmly. "I need to cancel the reservation." The cheerful typing stopped abruptly. A brief, heavy pause hung on the line. See?" Christopher said, his professional tone faltering slightly. "I do want to let you know, Mrs. Donovan, that because we are within the cancellation window for a premium property like the Magnolia Cottage, the reservation carries a non-refundable deposit of $6,800 that we wouldn't be able to return to your card." "I understand," I replied without missing a beat. "Please proceed with the cancellation." "Of course," he stammered slightly. "Is there anything, a reschedule perhaps? Or a shift in the dates?" "No reschedule. A full cancellation, please." "And Christopher?" "Yes, ma'am. Please send the cancellation confirmation directly to the primary guest email on file." "Certainly. Let me just confirm that would be Patricia Donovan. Shall I read the rest of the address to confirm?" "That's fine. That's the correct address. Thank you for your help, Christopher." "You're very welcome. I'm so sorry to lose the booking. Have a good day." 3 minutes. Start to finish. 3 minutes to burn $6,800 and shatter a 9-year illusion of compliance. I went to work. I analyzed financial portfolios. I ate a salad for lunch. I felt lighter than I had in nearly a decade. When Gregory came home from work that evening, he found me sitting on the living room sofa reading a book. He took off his tie, sat down heavily in the armchair across from me, and looked at me with exhausted, haunted eyes. "I canceled it," I said simply, not looking up from my book. He sat very quietly for a long time. "The full cost," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "Rachel, that trip? That was $34,000. "I know," I said, turning a page. "I paid it. The deposit was $6,800, I interrupted smoothly, closing the book and finally meeting his gaze. "I've accepted that loss. It was worth every penny." He looked at me, a mixture of awe, terror, and deep sadness in his eyes. "Are you sure about this, Rachel?" "Gregory." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, intense frequency. "She put me at the children's table, at the main table where I should have been sitting in your wife's chair. She literally balanced the room against my body. She deemed my size too offensive for a photograph in front of 40 members of your family. And then she had a professional document it." I paused, letting the reality of my words sink into his bones. "I am very, very sure." He was quiet for another long, heavy moment. He rubbed his face with both hands, the weight of his mother's actions finally crushing the last of his denial. Then, very carefully, he looked at me and said, "I'll talk to her. I'll go over there right now and I'll talk to her." "I know you will." I smiled softly, a cold, humorless smile. "But that happens after." "That happens after she finds out exactly what her small adjustment just cost her." The resort system was evidently backlogged because Palmetto Bluff didn't send the automated cancellation confirmation email until Friday morning at 9:12 a.m. Patricia called my cell phone exactly 35 minutes later at 9:47 a.m. Not Gregory. Me. I let it ring 3 times before sliding my finger across the screen. "Rachel," she said immediately. Her voice was tightly controlled, but there was a thin, frantic tremor underneath it. The impenetrable, professional warmth she always wore like armor had a severe hairline fracture in it. "Good morning, Patricia," I answered cheerfully. I've just received a very confusing email," she stammered, clearly struggling to maintain her composure. "A cancellation confirmation from Palmetto Bluff, the Magnolia Cottage, a reservation I didn't even know I had." "Oh yes," I said, my tone incredibly casual. "The anniversary gift, I booked it for you and Harold 6 months ago. 4 nights, the full family, private dining, the Magnolia Cottage. I was going to give it to you at the gala on Saturday." A sharp intake of breath hissed through the phone. A heavy, suffocating pause followed. You canceled it. Yes, I said simply. That's. Her voice cracked. The aristocratic facade was crumbling rapidly. Rachel, that was a significant $34,000. Yes, I finished for her, my voice turning to ice. I paid it from my personal savings. I saved for 4 months to give Harold the one vacation he's been dreaming of for 25 years. Silence. The kind of profound, ringing silence that happens when a person's entire worldview is violently recalibrated in a matter of seconds. Why? She breathed, her voice trembling. Why would you cancel it? I let a long, torturous moment pass. I let her sit in the agonizing unknown. Patricia, I asked softly, lethally calm. Why did you seat me at the children's table on Saturday? No answer. Just the ragged sound of her breathing over the line. The main table had 12 adults, I continued, my voice steady, refusing to let her off the hook. I am a member of this family. I'm a 37-year-old woman. I have been Gregory's wife for 9 years. You gave my chair away to preserve the balance of a photograph. Rachel, please? That is exactly what you said. I cut her off, my tone slicing through her excuses like a blade. You said the table photographs better with the current balance. I understand exactly what you meant. I have always understood what you meant, Patricia. For 9 entire years, every single time you made a small adjustment. But Saturday was different. Saturday was in public. Saturday was in front of 40 people who all sat there and watched where you put me. Long, agonizing silence. I don't think of you that way, Rachel, she whispered, sounding genuinely panicked. I want you to know that. I truly don't. I know you don't think you do, I said, keeping my voice perfectly even, refusing to raise it, refusing to give her the satisfaction of my anger. But you do it anyway, and I have let it happen, over and over, for 9 years because I love your son, and I wanted to be a part of this family, and I foolishly kept hoping that the small adjustments would eventually stop. But they haven't stopped, Patricia. They've only gotten more specific, more cruel, more silence. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head as she realized the sheer magnitude of the trap she had walked into. The resort, she said, her voice having shrunk down to something tiny and unrecognizable. Was it really? For us? Harold mentioned Palmetto Bluff at the Christmas dinner in 2022, I stated flatly. He told me it was the only place he and you had ever vacationed that he desperately wanted to go back to before he couldn't travel anymore. I listened, I remembered. The silence on the line this time was the longest yet. It stretched for nearly 30 seconds. He'd forgotten he even said that, Patricia said, her voice breaking on a sob, a real, actual sob. I know, I replied coldly. That's why I wrote it down. She didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, the managing logistics, society matriarch voice was completely gone, replaced by something older, smaller, and utterly defeated. Rachel, she whispered, I would like to rebook the reservation, if you're willing to allow it. Please. I'll consider it, I said smoothly, on one condition. Anything. What condition? At the next family dinner, and every family dinner after that, regardless of the occasion or the location, I sit at the main table, right next to Gregory, in whatever chair belongs to me as his wife. I paused, letting the finality of my terms sink in. No adjustments. Another silence. Yes, she said softly, completely broken. That's fair. That's more than fair. I rebooked Palmetto Bluff the following Monday. I paid the $34,000 all over again. Let me tell you about that phone call, because the details matter. I called Christopher, the same concierge who had processed my cancellation 3 days earlier with the quiet professionalism of a man who has heard every kind of drama that luxury travel can produce. When I told him I wanted to rebook the exact same reservation, same cottage, same dates, same everything, there was a pause on the line. Mrs. Donovan Hayes, he said carefully, I want you to know that the Magnolia Cottage is still available. We had not yet released it back into inventory. I had a feeling you might call back. I laughed. Actually laughed. Christopher, are you telling me you held a $34,000 reservation on a feeling? I'm telling you that in 15 years of concierge work at this resort, I have learned to recognize the difference between a cancellation made in anger and a cancellation made to prove a point. Yours was the latter. The cottage will be ready. I liked Christopher. I made a mental note to send him a very generous tip when the trip was over. The trip happened in April. Harold and Patricia flew to Savannah and drove the rest of the way to Bluff. I know this because Harold's sweet, quiet Harold who had spent 40 years orbiting Patricia's social machinery without ever quite understanding the engine, called me from the car. "Rachel," he said, and his voice was shaking in a way that made my chest tight. "I just want you to know, when Patricia told me about this trip, when she told me who planned it and who paid for it." I sat in my study and I cried. I cried for 20 minutes, Rachel. I'm 71 years old and I cried like a boy. "Harold, no, let me finish." I told Patricia something that night. I told her that in 41 years of marriage, the most thoughtful thing anyone in this family has ever done for me was done by the woman she has spent 9 years trying to hide. And I told her that if she ever makes you sit at the children's table again, or moves you out of a photograph, or makes one more small adjustment to push you to the margins of this family, I will sell the house in Westchester and move into a condominium in Florida by myself. I pressed my phone against my ear and stared at the ceiling of my kitchen. Gregory was in the next room. I could hear him humming something. He always hummed when he was cooking. The normalcy of the sound, the warmth of the house, the weight of Harold's words, it all converged into a moment so full I couldn't speak for several seconds. "Thank you, Harold," I said finally. "That means more than you know. You're my daughter," he said simply. "You've been my daughter since the day Gregory brought you home. Size 22, size 2, size whatever. You're my daughter and the person who remembered my dream when I had already forgotten it myself." He hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a very long time. The trip, by all accounts, was everything Harold had hoped for. Patricia sent me exactly one text message during the week. A photograph of Harold standing on the dock at sunset, holding a fishing rod, grinning with the uncomplicated joy of a man who has been given back a piece of himself he thought was gone. Beneath the photo, Patricia had typed 2 words, "Thank you." No exclamation point, no emoji, no performative warmth. Just 2 words, stripped of all decoration, as honest as anything Patricia Donovan had ever said to me. I stared at those 2 words for a long time. Then I typed back, "You're welcome." That was enough. For now, that was enough. When Harold finally returned from the trip, he told Gregory, over cigars on our back porch, in the specific meandering way that old men tell stories they want to remember forever, that the sunset over the May River on their 3rd evening was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He said he stood on the dock of the Magnolia Cottage with a glass of bourbon and watched the sky turn from gold to rose to violet. And he thought about the fact that the woman who had given him this moment was the same woman his wife had seated next to the sippy cups. "That's when I knew," Harold told Gregory. "That's when I knew your mother had been wrong about Rachel. Not just wrong in the way people are casually wrong in the way that costs something, in the way that means you missed the best person in the room because you were too busy looking at the wrong things." Gregory told me this story that night, lying in bed, his voice quiet and thick. I didn't say anything. I just put my head on his chest and listened to his heartbeat and thought about the fact that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not the grand gesture, not the confrontation, not the cancellation, not the devastating phone call. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is rebook the trip. Pay the money again. Give the gift anyway. Prove that your generosity is not conditional on being treated well, but make it absolutely devastatingly clear that your tolerance for being treated badly has reached its permanent non-negotiable end. 8 weeks later, at the Donovan family Christmas dinner, I sat at the dead center of the main table. Not at the end, not squeezed between cousins. Dead center, in the chair directly across from Patricia, with Gregory on my left and Harold on my right. Patricia did not move me. She did not suggest a small adjustment. She did not ask the photographer to reframe. She looked at me across the table, really looked at me perhaps for the first time in 9 years, and she said quietly, so that only I could hear, "That color looks beautiful on you, Rachel." I was wearing emerald green. The same emerald green she had once told me was a bit much for my frame. "Thank you, Patricia," I said, and I meant it. When the photographer came around, I did not move. I was in the front row of every single photograph taken that night. My size 22 body, in emerald green, dead center, unadjusted, unedited, and unmoved. Gregory held my hand under the table through the entire dinner. I let him. Some things in life take 9 years of patience, a brutal humiliation, a $34,000 cancellation fee, and a 71-year-old man crying in his study to finally arrive. But they still arrive, and that is the part I choose to hold on to. If this story resonated, if you've ever been the person who was adjusted out of the frame, seated at the wrong table, or quietly erased from the family aesthetic, drop a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. I read every single one. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one. You deserve the main table. You always did.